I'm honored to be here with Mel and Dan, who is proof positive that there are fairy tales in life, and I'll talk about that in a second. And with Melanie and David's girls, who are at the table with my girls and Dan's son. And that's another wonderful story. So let me back up and just say that one of the things that I hated to hear most after my husband was injured is things happen for a reason. I don't believe things happen for a reason. I don't believe a good man and a loving husband and a father dies for a reason. I believe that life is random. And I believe that good things can come out of bad things, which is exactly what Melanie and the cause for DVT and why we're all here tonight is a living example of how you take the bad thing and do something good. And it's also an incredible way to heal. And I know that firsthand after our experience as a family in taking that experience and using my voice and Bob using his voice to turn it on helping the cause of injured service members in Iraq. So maybe as a couple, you're lucky enough to meet that other couple that makes you what I call a foursquare friendship. Sometimes, you like him, but she's kind of a drag, or he's really cool and she couldn't hit a tennis ball to save her life. So every now and then you're lucky enough to meet a couple who really fills the bill. And that was Melanie and Bob and me and David. And for that brief shining moment, while they were both climbing the ladders of their various careers at NBC and at ABC, we had this wonderful relationship where I have an older son who's about to graduate from college, but everybody sitting at the table lines up in opposite ways. So there are Nick and Chris, and there's my daughter Kath, who are the same age. And then Ava was born, and we had twins who were the same age. So there was this wonderful union, and we all at that point in time would go out and do things, and pagers would ring, and wars would happen, and men would go off. And Melanie and I had that friendship that we understood that our husbands were in a job where at the drop of a hat, we would be left with the kids. And we loved being left with the kids. And when David died that night, I will never forget it because it was almost exactly 10 years ago. And we were at my twins, who are now 13, so 10 years ago, it was their birthday. And Ava was over, and Mel and I were watching the television, and David was reporting from the war, and his face was very, very dark. And we were laughing, we were making jokes, we thought, maybe it's time to take a shower, buddy, because you're looking pretty grim. And it was that night that I got the phone call from NBC, from Elena, our dear friend who's also here tonight. And she said, I can't reach Mel for some reason. And is there any way you can get to her? And I knew how to get to Mel. And I called Mel. And I didn't ask Elena what happened, but I knew that if Elena was calling me, it probably wasn't good news. And everything that transpired after that is everyone's worst nightmare. The one in an instant moment when a phone call or a piece of news changes your life. And we were together for that next year, our children, each other. Bob, who was also covering the war and the invasion with ABC, came home. I'll never forget talking with Mel in her home, and Mel talking to Bob in Iraq and saying, can you just please come home? And Bob did. He was 10 miles from Baghdad from the advance, and he said to his bosses, I have to go home. I have to go home for Mel. I have to go home for her girls, and I have to go home for my children because I have to show them that life goes on. And that would begin what I would call a nightmare period. And then 3 years later, when Bob was injured, and I was unreachable by phone, and it was ABC who called Melanie, oddly, in one of those twinned fates that really would probably make a decent made-for-TV movie, except that I don't think we're going to go there. It was Mel who was able to tell ABC where I was in Disney World and get through to me to give me the news that Bob had been injured. We both took our lives, and we both tried to take the bad thing and make something good out of it. And not only did Mel do that with the cause of DVT, and it's hard for me to believe that it's a decade later. It's hard for me to believe that all of that horror and strife and sadness and grief has now produced this amazing woman with her incredible new husband, Dan. Maybe not so new anymore, right, guys? Yeah, kind of mellowing into sort of an old couple, aren't you? And our amazing, beautiful children who are grown and taking the stage of their life, and we're so proud of you, all of you, how you've all handled this. Both our situation, the Bloom McNulty situation. You're incredible kids, and you have an incredible mother and an incredible stepdad as well. So what's my takeaway? My takeaway is thank you for being here. Because by honoring Mel tonight and by honoring the memory of David, you're taking all of that goodwill and you're making sure that hopefully the next person who has the symptoms is now going to be aware of those 3 letters, DVT, something I hadn't heard of 10 years ago. And now I feel like everywhere I turn around, I do. And that's because of the work in your presence here tonight. So Melanie, I love you. You're still that Foursquare couple with us. And I'm so honored to be here tonight. And I think we're all so incredibly proud of what you've done. You've moved through the world with grace and with beauty and with dignity, and by taking your story and turning your light on everyone else. So I honor you. Thank you.
When I started speaking out about DVT, deep vein thrombosis, I hoped people would listen and talk.
David collapsed and died when a blood clot in his leg traveled to his lungs. Although he was only there a short time, David's coverage helped revolutionize the industry. Thanks to the Bloommobile, a modified truck rigged to bring you live pictures on the move as the coalition forces marched to Baghdad.
Clearly he was in a dangerous area covering a war. And so the irony is, you know, the enemy was within. What took his life was a blood clot, essentially, a DVT. I've often called that clot the bomb that lied within his own body because he couldn't protect himself from something he didn't know was there. But it is common. I've been really working on raising awareness about DVT since losing David, because I had never heard of DVT when I got the call about David, and learned after the fact that it impacts so many people. More deaths are caused by this annually than AIDS and breast cancer combined. 2 million Americans each year develop a DVT, and out of that, 300,000 Americans will die each year from DVT, and yet it's preventable.
I was reading 74% of Americans have never heard of this deep vein thrombosis.
And I had never heard of it until I received that call. And I think it's awareness. I think people need to be aware what the risk factors are.
This year we're kicking off National Screening Day, which is today, and that's why we're here with this big RV. We're actually going to tour the country and assess people's risks for DVT.
Some of those risk factors that we're looking at now, you know, the doctors were asking me all the time, could you be pregnant? Are you in birth control? Have you smoked? Is there any of this in your family history?
Right. I've since learned that these are some common risk factors, along with long-haul flights. 50% of the time, it's a silent killer. So it's important to know if you fall into the risk categories. So if people just become aware, you know, knowledge is power. And if you're just aware about DVT and know what to look for, warning signs and symptoms could be pain or cramps in the leg. You've been on a long flight, maybe you have some of the other risk factors, that's when you should talk to your doctor. It became clear to me that this could be a very positive thing to do and sort of redirect my own grief and frustration and loss into something positive to help others. I think that's the great healer, is to reach out and try to help other people. We've had tens of thousands of people go to the website, preventdvt.org, and download their risk assessment tool. We've had over 10,000 people write in their own personal stories about DVT, saying we saw the story about your husband, or we saw some of this media that we've been doing to raise awareness, and they got checked, had DVTs, and lived.
After a long return flight from Hawaii, I experienced what I thought was a pulled muscle in my right calf. But after my mother read Fighting for David, we decided I should go to the emergency room. An ultrasound confirmed that I had DVT. If it weren't for your article, I might not be here today.
It feels good to know that if one life is saved from having heard his story, then his death won't be in vain. That's my goal. I'm Melanie Bloom, and I tell David's story so others will be able to write happier stories and reduce their risk. So please talk to your doctor about your risk of DVT.
I have nothing to say after Henry and Lee are up here. What can I add to this? Seriously. It just means the world to me to be honored here this evening. I simply have no words to express how great it feels. But I would be lying if I didn't say that it is bittersweet. Because no matter how many years have passed, and no matter how much tremendous progress has been made working with the coalition, and no matter how happy I am with being recognized at this special event tonight, underlying all of it is the stark reality that for me to be up here tonight, somebody had to lose his life. My husband, David Bloom, a loving and devoted father to Christine, Nicole, and Ava. I have found joy and happiness, even pride, in a job well done, but I never forget at what cost. Having said that, I do sincerely feel joy and pride in the coalition's progress over these 10 years. And by the way, I want to thank Julie and Claire with Burson Marsteller who put together that highlights reel. Thank you for that. I can't even remember all the states, cities, and towns, hospitals that we traveled to, and all the media events we did. I remember IMUS, but all those media events that we did, Cowboy Hat, over the course of the past 10 years, it's kind of a blur. But as I watched that video, I felt that there were 4 elements missing from that highlights reel. The first element, friendship. And Lee was just up here a few minutes ago talking about the night of that horrible phone call. And yes, she was by my side that night for support. But then she stayed by my side, and she encouraged me to pull myself up from my bootstraps, get out there and work to make a difference. Without her support and without her faith in me, I don't know if I would have had it in me to partner up with the coalition and do the work that needed to be done, to raise awareness of DVT, that condition that claimed the life of my husband at the young age of 39, father of 3 little girls. Lee, along with other close friends and family, some of you who are here tonight, Michelle, Kathy, Elena Nachmanoff with NBC News, who was, ironically enough, David's agent at one point, and then close friend and colleague at NBC. And if he left us any gift, it's leaving the gift of a closer bond with you. I got to know you better once we got David out of the way. No, I'm kidding. That's a bad joke. But we've become so close. And I just want to say thank you to all of you from the bottom of my heart. And I know all of you in this room probably have a Lee or a BFF in your life. And if so, hold on tight. Cherish that friendship. It is a palpable and tangible bond, and friendship contains magic healing powers. And the second thing I think missing from that highlights video were the dedicated and devoted doctors, nurses, and healthcare professionals who are working alongside me every step of the way. I can go around and tell my story again and again in the hopes of reaching people. But the physicians and nurses and all of you who work in the healthcare profession, you are the ones who are doing the heavy lifting. You are the ones who are literally and physically touching people and helping heal people and giving people hope. The research being conducted by the NATF is not only groundbreaking, it is life-saving. I may have been in front of the camera, but behind the scenes were the true professionals who identified a need for awareness, took strides to create the Coalition to Prevent DVT, and later Dr. Goldhaber founded the NATF with one goal in mind: to find a way to prevent loss of life from clots that kill more people each year in our nation than from AIDS and breast cancer combined. The third thing I thought was missing from that highlights reel were the patients. 2 million Americans will develop a clot each year. 600,000 of them will go on to develop a pulmonary embolism when the clot travels to the lungs, and out of them, 300,000 will die. If you get a DVT that develops into a PE, your odds of survival is 50-50. David was one of those 300,000 Americans who lost their life to DVT-PE back in 2003. And a study done at the time by the APHA showed that 74% of Americans had never heard of DVT. And I was one of them until I got that call that night. And here was David in sort of the vortex of a war in the middle of Iraq, and he died from a clot that took his life as ruthlessly as an assassin. Over these 10 years, I have met hundreds, if not thousands, of people who have had a DVT or have had a loved one who suffered from DVT, and so many voices with stories just like David's, and they would line up after an event and tell me their stories. And there were so many who said, David saved my life. It was his story or seeing this news article that caused me to seek help. So I used my voice to amplify the voices of all the other patients out there who needed and wanted to be heard. And it was humbling and a real honor to have that privilege and to be that voice for these 10 years. And the people that I've met out there have stories, some with happy endings, like Henry Hagopian, who survived DVT, like my friend and a special guest tonight, Marianne Huntsman, who at the young age of 22 nearly lost her life from multiple DVTs and PEs, and I believe she shared that she had 10 clots in her lungs and survived, age 22. And then we've heard about people in the news, like tennis star Serena Williams, who survived a DVT PE, rapper Heavy D, who collapsed in front of his apartment and died from DVT PE, and most recently, even former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, who suffered a clot in the vein between her brain and skull, and fortunately, with proper medical care, she survived. Over these years, sadly, I've also met people with stories that ended in tragedy like mine. Like a family I met at an event in St. Louis, who came up to talk to me after my speech. They shared that 2 months prior, they had just lost their 21-year-old daughter. She'd had Achilles tendon surgery and died 3 days later when a clot formed in her leg and hit her lungs. They had never heard of DVT. The doctor who performed her surgery and sent the young lady home had never mentioned the risk of DVT or informed them about the warning signs and symptoms that they might want to watch out for. So these heartsick parents said if only our DVT event had been 2 months earlier, their daughter may have lived, and they may still have had her with them. Awareness and knowledge is power, and that is why I do what I do. And my goal, along with all the good people at the Coalition and at the NATF, want to make DVT a household name. I want to inform people about the risk factors, warning signs, and symptoms so that no one has to learn about DVT the way my family did, the way David did. The good news is that progress has been made with events like this one and doctors like Sam Goldhaber and Gino Murley and many others. Public awareness has increased significantly in the past decade. March has been firmly established as DVT Awareness Month, and the Coalition introduced National DVT Screening Day. The Joint Commission has mandated national patient safety goals that have been implemented across hospitals and care facilities across the country and really changed the way people are being assessed for their risk for DVT and changed the way they've been treated. The Surgeon General issued a call to action to prevent DVT PE. And the Coalition has had more than 1 billion media impressions, helping to raise the level of public awareness by close to 20%. And I don't even have data on the tremendous progress of Dr. Goldhaber's efforts with the NATF, which I know is bringing the level of treatment and the level of awareness to a whole other level. We've come a long way, but there is so much more work to be done. And each one of you who came here tonight and donated to our cause so generously, from my youngest daughter, Ava Bloom, and her little friends, Claire and Nora Woodruff, not so little anymore, they're 13, to the doctors here who are thought leaders in this and pioneers in thrombosis prevention. You are all helping to make a difference. You are helping to save lives. And I feel truly humbled and grateful to be able to help others in David's honor and his memory. If he had to die, he died while in the public eye from something that needed a spotlight. And I've tried to shine that spotlight and keep David's memory alive and leave a lasting legacy that he would be proud of. Well, I mentioned there were 4 things missing from the video that Henry played for you. And the final and fourth is the unsung hero in all of this, at least from my personal standpoint. And someone without whose support I would not be up here receiving this honor tonight. I hope you all indulge me just a personal moment here. 5 years ago, I met the wonderful Dan McNulty. We married, and along with my 3 girls, I gained another daughter and a son, Gavin, who's here with us tonight. And I gained the love and unfaltering support of a man who is incredible, and I can't imagine how hard it must be to hear me talk about David over and over and over again, year after year. And a lesser man may feel at times that he's in the shadow of this journalist and television personality and all-around great guy. But I have to say, every time I go out there and tell this story, it hurts every time, and I feel it every time. And I saw Henry feeling and going back in time with his memories, and Lee with yours. And Dan watches as he sees a little bit of my heart gets torn each time. And he's been there to put his arms around me, tell me I did good, and remind me of the people out there who've been helped that day. So not to sound too corny, but Dan, you are the wind beneath my wings. And don't worry, I will not break into song right now, Kathy. But Dan, you should get your own highlights reel. So in closing, along with my DVT message, I hope my personal message resonates. Tell the people in your life how much they mean to you. Life is fleeting. Don't wait. And all of us are coping with things that are daunting to the spirit. But if we look for the value in the life we are given and help others where we can, then everyone will realize what treasures we do have. Life is a gift, glowing with purpose and meaning, and my life is filled with more blessings than I can count. Thank you.